Okay, so we are back in the Gospel of John, and we're about two-thirds of the way through chapter 18. However, this is now occurring after 2 months away for the summer. So I do want to give a little bit of a recap of where we are. So we are in the midst of the trials for Jesus. And whereas the other gospel writers, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, their focus is going to be a little bit more on the trial in front of the Jews. John is more focused on the trial in front of the Gentiles. Now, Luke himself is also kind of going that route, but Luke kind of gives it almost half and half. But John is usually going to be the one that's going to go, yeah, this happened with the Jews, but this is what's happening with the Gentiles. So he goes on for about mm, around a chapter on this. It's starts partway through chapter 18 and then it goes halfway through chapter 19. Anyways, so what John is trying to accomplish here is he's trying to show the Jewish rejection of the promised messianic king, and then also to a degree the acceptance of the Gentiles of the Jewish messianic king, which is extremely ironic because the Jews are supposed to be the ones that the Messianic king is supposed to be subjecting to him. So for the Gentiles to be more sympathetic to Jesus in certain ways, anyways, than the Jews, this is what John is trying to say. It also even harkens back to his introduction to his gospel way back in chapter 1, where he says that the word came to those who were for him. So he went to his own, but his own did not accept him. So he had to go to those who were not of him, and to those who do accept them, gave them the power to be children of God. So this is John trying to show that, yes, this isn't just for the Jews, this is also for the Gentiles. Yeah. So let's concentrate a little bit more on where we are in the conversation. So I'll show people on screen what's going on. So the trial before Pilate starts basically in verse 28 of chapter 18 in John. So we already looked at this last time, or for actually a few sessions, verses 28 to 34, but I'll just very briefly recap this. So the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas. So Caiaphas acting in the official capacity of high priest. Unofficially, it was Annas. So there's two high priests, if you will, and John usually talks about Annas more in the actual high priest. Annas being the father-in-law of Caiaphas. So Jesus was taken from the Jewish trials, and they were condemning him with insufficient evidence, so they didn't have proper witnesses to condemn Jesus. So now they're going to put this more on the Romans. So they had a mock trial, more or less, because or a kangaroo trial because they didn't have sufficient evidence. And now instead of them executing Jesus, they want him executed by the Romans. And there could be a couple different reasons for this one, of which is it's the Passover, and they don't want to get anywhere close to a dead body to become unclean to celebrate this Passover feast. And another possible reason would be that they don't want to give him the dignity of a Jewish execution. So for this guy who claimed to be a messianic king, they're going to give him over to the Gentiles to kill. So he's definitely not of the Jewish people. So those are a couple possible reasons. Anyway, so they bring him to Pilate's, well, it says palace here, but it's technically a praetorium. So they take him to the praetorium, and this would be where Pilate, as the governor in Judea, where technically it's the Roman state of Palestine at this time. Yeah, this is going to be where he hears cases. So they're taking him like first thing in the morning, which is also about when you're doing it at this day and age. I don't think we want to start our workday at, well, sunrise, but yeah, this is what they did. Anyway, so they bring him to this place. They don't go inside because they associate this with being unclean. Again, they want to be able to celebrate the Passover feast, which is happening. So, yeah, they bring him to Pilate, and Pilate quite rightly asks, okay, well, what are you charging him with? And then they basically give him a non-answer. Well, he's a criminal. Yeah, but what is his crime? That's kind of the. So if you're not going to tell me, as Pilate says in verse 3, we're like, well, then take him yourself and judge him by your own law. And then they say, we have no right to execute anyone, which is actually false, because they can execute somebody according to the religious law of the land. But that would mean that they're trying to execute him for blasphemy, which is the official charge that they gave him under the trial of Caiaphas. John doesn't mention this because he doesn't give you the Caiaphas trial, he gives you the Annas trial. But Caiaphas charged him with blasphemy, claiming to be God. Except Jesus is God, so it's not they can't really charge him with blasphemy. Regardless, they could actually execute him under that charge, but again, they don't want to, possibly because this would be too close to uncleanliness, or they don't want to give him the dignity of killing him by their own law. So they're trying to create a different charge so that the Romans have to kill him. And since the Romans would allow the Jews to kill Jesus by way of the religious law, the Jews now have to go by a civil law. So when Pilate goes back inside the Praetorium, he asks Jesus, are you king of the Jews? So this could be that Jesus was violating some sort of civil law, and Pilate would most likely have been at least aware that there was the triumphal procession back on Sunday. So this is Friday. So back on Sunday, Jesus came in being hailed as King of the Jews into Jerusalem and went all the way to the temple. Pilate could have also heard a few different charges here and there. In fact, I think it might have been Luke who mentions, Luke mentions, like, right as they're bringing Jesus to Pilate, that they're saying that he is claiming to be the Christ, the Messiah, the King. So Pilate goes back inside and he's just asking Jesus point blank, are you claiming to be the king? Are you trying to usurp power away from Herod or Caesar? So Jesus then gives him kind of a non-answer where he answers the question with a question. So that's about where we came to last time. So we're beginning with verse 35 here today. But before we do, I just want to ask, are there any questions thus far? Nope. Okay. So could I get somebody to please read verses 35 to 37?
Okay. Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, you are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me.
Okay. Yeah, we'll cut off there just because we're going to get into the question of truth later on, and that could take a while in and of itself. So we're going to focus a little bit more on Jesus and his claims to the kingdom. Yeah. So Pilate asks, am I a Jew? Or more literally in the Greek, not I Jew am. And then you go, wait, what? It's a perfectly logical sentence in the Greek, but why would you have a negative in there and what's going on? So Pilate is just asking, well, am I a Jew? He's trying to use a strong negative in his question. He's placing kind of the negative, the not in there at the very beginning to say that he's indicating that he wants Jesus to affirm that he isn't a Jew. Then he also has the emphatic pronoun I in there in the Greek as uh, yeah, in Greek verbs, the pronoun's implied, so Pilate is making a big statement here with the question for Jesus to answer in the form of am I a Jew? And Jesus is supposed to answer no. So he's trying to very much distance himself from the idea of being well versed in the issues of the Jews. So yeah, am I a Jew? Or maybe I should pronounce this more emphatically. Am I a Jew? There we go. That would be more like that would be more the sense. Okay. Yeah, so it's not exactly that he's ignorant of things. He might know somewhat of what's going on, but he really doesn't care. So yeah, he just wants to get down to the bottom of, well, what on earth is going on in the little intricacies that he has no interest in and he's not involved in. So so then he asks, uh, or said, has a statement and then a question. So your own people, so people could also be translated as nation. So the people of Israel or the nation of Israel has handed you over to me. That could also be part of how you read this. So Israel has rejected their Messiah, and so have the chief priests. And this could also be taken as high priests. So it could just be referring to Annas and Caiaphas, but it could just be the inner circle of the Sanhedrin. Hard to say exactly what Pilate is trying to say, but or has in mind, I mean, but yeah, definitely the high priest as well as the inner circle. So the Sanhedrin is trying to get rid of Jesus. And they both handed Jesus over to Pilate. So I also want to bring out the handed over there because that verb is the same verb for betrayal. So for the Greek, literally when you betray somebody, you hand them over, you deliver them. So this could be what Pilate spoke verbatim, or John is also just kind of tweaking the language a little to bring the double meaning in there, where yes, the nation of Israelites as well as the priests have betrayed their Messiah. So it's not just Judas, it's the entirety of the nation. Uh, yeah, so it's not just a simple extradition of a prisoner. And let's see. Yeah, so they're also betraying their religion and by him highlighting the chief priest, so the religion is also suspect. Especially since they're trying to charge Jesus with blasphemy, which is a religious charge, not a civil charge. So they're even betraying him in terms of proper justice. But now, yeah, Pilate needs to know, what is it you have done? What is the actual charge made against you? Because I have no idea what's going on. Well, no, again, he does know. He's smarter than he looks, or is somewhat portrayed to be. But he definitely wants to get into, well, what's actually happening, because he knows this person is being betrayed to him. And there's the veneer of what's going on, that the people are trying to get rid of this Jesus fellow, but Pilate's smart enough to know something else is going on. So what really happened? What's really going on? So Jesus is more or less confirming what Pilate suspects, which is that Jesus is not committing an insurrection. So if Jesus was claiming to be the king and trying to give the land to the people of Israel, um, then he would be coming with an army. He would be raising up people to try and fight against the Romans, possibly also against Herod himself. But Pilate has seen none of this. So if Jesus isn't committing insurrection, then what's actually going on? So are you a king? And Jesus replies, oh, sorry, no, wait, I have a little bit more of a notes.
This is probably a stupid question.
Yes.
Was Pilate a Jew?
No, he's a full-blooded Roman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, he's only been in the region for a few years now. As with the Roman governors, usually they only lasted a few years and then they would transfer somewhere else or what have you. So I can't remember how long Pilate is there for in total, but I think he's in Judea for around 8 years. I think he originally came from the region around Rome, but I'd have to look that up.
What is Pilate in relation to Herod?
So Herod is a client king.
A what?
A client king.
Client?
So let me try to explain this. So let's say, oh, this is horribly drawn, I'm sorry. But to give you an idea, okay. So this is the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Sea of Galilee over here, Jordan River, Dead Sea. So this is Judea, Israel. Israel doesn't really get called Israel that much in Jesus' day, because there's different parts of it that are like cordoned off because it's part of Samaria, and the Samaritans, they're the heretical / bastardized offspring of the different tribes or different peoples the Assyrians brought in to intermingle with the Jews 700 years ago. So the Jews don't really like to think of Samaritans. Samaritans are still at least partially Jewish, and they still somewhat have the religion, but the Jews see it as a heretical sect. So during the Babylonian captivity, when they were taken off, so that was the southern kingdom specifically, when they were taken off in the Babylonians, different than the Assyrians, and then came back, they started settling everywhere. So Judea is somewhat this whole region, even though historically it's known as Israel. So what happened was you have the Roman invasion about a century before the crucifixion, around a century before the crucifixion. So the Romans, they're expanding their empire. Well, they're trying to solidify the empire, and then they decide to expand it. So this is under General Pompey. General Pompey had the absolutely astronomical task of trying to rid pirates from the Mediterranean Sea. And that was kind of thought to be impossible, but Pompey did that in a few years. So he was like one of the best generals of the ancient world, to be quite honest. But he lost to Julius Caesar in the end. Anyways, so while he was trying to take down all the pirates, he kind of came into Judea and he took over this entire region again in less than a year. So this is under Roman control. However, they don't have the manpower to sustain it. What they do is they take this block over here, and this is Caesarea Maritima. So, of course, they come in, make their own city on the sea, Maritima, and then name it after Caesar. So Caesarea Maritima. Pompey would not have liked that because he was on the other side of Caesar for quite a number of years. Anyways, so the Romans actually have full control over this area, and from here they're supposed to try and control this one. But rather than take care of this themselves, they enlist help from the area over here, which is known as Idumea, or if you will, Edom. So this is where King Herod the Great comes in, because he makes a deal with the Romans. Hey, I can control all this region. And Herod himself is also a fairly good strategic thinker as well as statesman. So he's actually able to do that. So this actually gets controlled by the Edomites. So that's King Herod the Great, the guy who tried to kill Jesus as a baby. But shortly after he tried to kill Jesus as a baby, he died of natural causes, which you wouldn't assume would happen with a tyrant, but that's what happened. He was strong enough to survive that long. So this was then divided amongst the sons. The sons were somewhat incompetent, or at least some of them were. So what ended up happening is the Romans decided to directly control this region, with the exception of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's over here, which is, yeah, still somewhat under Herod's control. It's under Roman jurisdiction, but Herod gets to come in. And the younger Herod, so Herod Antipas, keeps the region around Galilee. So, but he's only ruling under the greater Roman rule. He's allowed to rule because the Romans don't want to be bothered with this. Eventually, though, when you get to the Jewish war that starts up in 65 AD, they're like, well, the line of the Herods is incompetent, so we'll just boot them out and take over the whole thing and directly rule the whole thing. But in the time of Jesus, the Romans are directly ruling this territory, and they're indirectly ruling this territory through their client king, Herod Antipas. So he's king only by virtue of the Romans saying, yeah, you can be king.
So who's Herod the Tetrarch here? I'm confused because there's so many. It seems there's so many Herod.
Yeah,
there was
so-
the Herod when that threatened Jesus has a big.
So Tetrarch means that he's one of 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's him trying to rule in relation to his 2 brothers as well as the Romans. But when the brothers get killed, you have Herod Antipas that survives.
So where's Pilate?
So Pilate would be governing Caesarea Maritima, but he's made his way to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. Yeah. Because again, he doesn't want to be ruling in some hick town over here. He wants to be where you have actual Roman civilization. This weird backwards land over here.
So who are the 4 that were not governing, but
No,
Like,
as I said, it's the 3 sons of Herod as well as the Roman governor. Yeah. But yeah, so when this was established, they just the Romans didn't have the manpower to effectively govern the entire region. And that's the only reason why they didn't take over everything right away. So they left that to client kings to rule on their behalf, because they could still get summon enough troops to beat up whoever was not listening to them. So for the sake of example, Pompey took this over, he established the city, and he's like, okay, you guys, you have to give us taxes so we don't come back. And then they go, no, we're not paying taxes. In fact, we're going to try to lay siege and take Caesarea Maritima. Well, then within a few months, the Romans would come back with a few legions and just kill everybody. Which is effectively what the Jewish war was a century from that time. So the Romans could definitely do it. But they did, yeah, the Jews just didn't want to start that up.
The Herod that Salome danced for Antipas, okay.
So, and also this division is why in Luke, and we're going to get into this a little bit as we near the end of chapter 18 in John. But this is also why Pilate tries to hand Jesus over to Herod. Because Herod, like he would normally be up here, but he's down in Jerusalem for the feast, same as Pilate. So Pilate wants to hand Jesus over to Herod because Jesus is a Galilean, which is under Herod's jurisdiction. Pilate has to take care of everything down here. Herod would take over everything over here. So he's like, oh, good, I don't have to deal with this. So he tries to pawn him off on Herod, and then Herod doesn't do anything because it's Herod. Or Herod Antipas. Herod the Great, his father, he would be able to do something, but his children were jokes. Yeah. Makes sense? Hopefully. Hopefully it makes more sense.
Struggling with all because so you said the Herod the Tetrarch. He was like the one when Jesus was a baby.
No, that was Herod the Great.
It was Herod the Great, and he had.
Herod the Tetrarch is one of his sons.
But you said he had 3 sons. So why do
the territory was divided between 3 sons? He actually had more children than that. He killed a few. Because
the Tetrarch mean one of the 4.
That's what I said.
So,
3 sons and the Roman governor. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. Some geopolitics way back. Alrighty.
Kings as long as they didn't rock the Robert's boat.
Pretty much, yeah. Because the Romans, they're, at least in this day and age, they were very efficient. Like they were a really good empire to actually rule places. They weren't necessarily the most moral people of all time, but they definitely knew how to rule kingdoms and distribute things economically. So yeah, if they could avoid ruling an area directly, they would, because they had enough territory to try and conquer or claim or maintain elsewhere. Yeah. Didn't work out so well in Germany, but oh well. Those Germans. Okay.
Wars are always fought about territories, aren't they? Claiming territory, it seems.
Resources, honor, politics, like political systems, that's a big one nowadays. No, there's a few reasons. Territory is just the most obvious way to represent what's going on in the war. Yeah. Well, even say, for the sake of example, China, because we're still somewhat in a Cold War with them, whether or not we want to admit it. So what China's been doing is it's trying to maintain control of the South China Sea so that it can regulate all trade regulations through there. And since that's one of the world's major trade routes, they would actually, if they're able to control that area, be able to control some of the most affluent countries in the world. Which is also why India and Australia are somewhat concerned about that, because that's one of the main trade routes they use. So what China has been doing to try and control trade has been trying to lay claim to some of the territory. And thus they've been creating artificial islands in the South China Sea. And then turn those into, well, at least some of them into military bases. Yeah. So it's not always just about territory, but territory gets to be manifestation of, well, the desire of what could be theirs. Yeah. Well, that's modern to the politics.
And they want Taiwan really bad.
Well, they say that it's already theirs. But...
Well, I went to Taiwan and they don't want to be called Chinese.
No, they don't, but they can't say that publicly until they get enough countries on their side to defend them. Anyways, we're going back. Okay, so Jesus replied to this, saying, my kingdom is not of this world. So Pilate, kind of looking into, well, yeah, what is it that you have done? He wants to know, well, what's going on with your claims over the Jewish people, as they're bringing Jesus, saying that he's king, whereas Jesus, as far as Pilate would know, has been making religious claims. So is this moving over into more political and geographical claims, like laying claim to territory? So I'm just trying to look through my notes to see if there's nothing. Yeah, so Pilate also would not have any idea what the heck is going on with the religious claims whatsoever, because to him, Jesus is just another Jew, another religious Jew. And as a Roman, he might not even care about the different sects of Judaism. The four main sects, there's three main ones, and one of them is somewhat minor. But the four sects of Judaism at this time would be Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots. So to Pilate, these are all just one thing. They're the Jews. And then when you get Jesus coming in here with his own thought, which is absolutely denying Sadduceeism, challenging Phariseeism, somewhat agreeing with Essenes, somewhat,
Some say,
definitely not Zealots.
some say Jesus was from the Essene. I assume that must be heresy. Or?
Essenes not so much. They're their own thing. I would doubt that Jesus would lay claim to being of them. There has been some pretty well defensed claims that John the Baptist was originally an Essene. Not that we could really know, but yeah, I wouldn't mind people saying that John the Baptist originally came from that tradition. Like, he was also a prophet of God, so he would be coming more into the Christian mindset. But yeah, Essenes were apocalyptically minded monastics. I think that would be the most concise way to describe it. So they're talking about the forces of light versus the forces of dark, that there will be a reckoning at the end of the world, and they want to live in hyper-religious and holy communities by which you segregate yourselves away from the world. And so males and females were also divided at that time. And they would, one of the key features would be that they would have a lot of ritual watchings. So if you really want to, that would be similar to baptism. Not exactly baptism, because we're saying you need to be washed once for the forgiveness of sins, but for them, you're constantly cleansing yourself. Okay. So again, John the Baptist, possibly influenced by Essenes, sure. But he's also a prophet of God, so God is giving him directly what needs to be done. So again, and for Pilate trying to make sense of all these things, Jesus is just another one of these teachers who knows how orthodox or schismatic he is. Pilate doesn't know. Pilate doesn't really care. The Romans don't really care in the centuries that follow because Christians were seen as just a different sect of Judaism by the Romans for about 2.5 centuries until some of the persecutions get started, and then Christians are more defiant in certain ways than the Jews. And the Jews try to distance themselves more from the Christians. So the Romans don't really know what's going on. So, okay. So Jesus says then, my kingdom is not of this world. So he's not answering any question directly. He isn't saying what he's done. Pilate did ask him is he a king? So Jesus is somewhat answering that. So he said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest, but my kingdom is from another place. So my kingdom is not of this world. What does this mean? I'll actually ask you, what does this mean?
I'm sure it confused Pilate.
Yeah.
For the world that given was.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
God's kingdom is too kind no, that's not quite right. Is it heavenly kingdom? The king, I don't I mean, you were the God's kingdom is eternal. The world isn't.
Yep. So, well, maybe I'll list some of these things up here.
I'm
guessing I'll eventually get it right.
Oh, that would be April.
Well, no. So we had the heavenly kingdom. So we had yeah, eternal. And one of the things you're saying, I guess concisely, in the world. That's D. That's D. And do what I say. Okay. Not of the world.
Okay.
I'll put their Satan's domain. Okay. So we had
Temporarily Satan's domain. Because the new heavens and the new earth are coming, right?
if we're saying the world is temporary, yes. Okay. Because it's going to be his until Jesus destroys this world. Yeah.
What are the chances that
millennialists, and then there's some odd stuff with that. But we're Lutherans, we're millennialists, we still have the tradition in the West. So I'll say no to that. Okay.
So what chance was there that Pilate believed in any other world?
Let me think on that for a second.
Was that a new
This
concept?
would also depend on how educated Pilate is. Being a governor like high up in society, so he was probably at least somewhat educated. So I would say slim to nil.
Yeah.
And that would depend on what's going on in Roman thought as well as in Greek thought. And if he's an educated Roman, then he would probably be leaning a little bit more Greek than Roman, which I'm more familiar with some of the Greek thought than the Roman thought, because the Romans don't talk too much about that, or at least not the ones that I've read. So Pilate as an educated Roman, he would most likely be following, let's say, Hesiod's understanding of the history of the universe, where you have multiple iterations of worlds. So there was a literal golden age where the gods created a universe, and then you had populations that were as gold, and then that got destroyed. So then you kind of got to the Silver Age, and that got destroyed, Bronze Age, that got destroyed. And then you finally get to more fleshy age with the humans as they are now. So like it's always a succession, it's not a diversification of other worlds. Then that would be more Hesiod's picture, but he could also be following the Greek Stoics, and the Stoics believe that there is but one universe, and it can reach its consummation and reset itself. But there is one universe, and all things are a fraction of the one. So this is what's something called pantheism. So the collective of all things is God himself. So this is an impersonal God. It's a God that is independent of thought, really, but you're part of him. So the Stoics would kind of see everything as a movement towards trying to live properly as the universe is supposed to function. But yeah, you don't really have other worlds. And I've been trying to think about, because if Pilate's leaning a bit more towards Platonism or Aristotelian philosophy, and Platonism is kind of ebbed out at this point in time because the Middle Platonist school is what's going on here, and nobody really cares about it that much. Then there is still the idea of the spheres, the other heavenly bodies, but those worlds are somewhat inconsequential to our own, except with kind of their light and whatever music could be given. Music of the spheres. I don't know if that rings any bells for anyone. Anyways, so Pilate probably, yeah, slim to nil that he's thinking of other worlds. So you might just see this as a concept that is existing in Judaism, but he doesn't really have any connection for it. So for him, yeah, who cares? In any case, you actually get to Jesus' sense. We're looking at these sorts of things, and I'll just tack onto eternal here, the Messianic kingdom. Because when you have some of the prophecies in the Old Testament that are talking about his kingdom will last forever and all this, it's because the Messiah is reigning upon his throne in Jerusalem at that time, that God has finally brought forth the Messianic king, and his reign is not from then until eternity. So this is seen as a little bit more militaristic, because say like with Psalm 2, I mean, you have Psalm 2 every once in a while in the worship service. You'll probably remember at least the line, "Kiss the Son, lest he be mad at you." And that's because he will lay low the nations with his rod, like the symbol of his power. That also, say, comes up in certain passages in the prophets where they're talking about laying low some of the nations, the sinful nations. Isaiah also talking about the wealth of the nations coming to Israel, coming to Jerusalem, and the heavenly throne therein at the end of the age.
When is Dad's
So yeah, this is still somewhat on earth.
Oh, okay.
Same thing with this. This is still somewhat on earth. Heavenly kingdom depends how you want to define this. Is this kind of a more spirit-filled kingdom where you have something like the church militant, where we're in the kingdom of God, where we're in the world but not of the world? Or is this something that it is that the earth is presenting copies of the heavenly. The author of Hebrews kind of gets into that a little bit when he starts talking about the temple in Jerusalem and how it's but a copy of the true tabernacle in heaven, and that Jesus is bringing this down at the end of the age. And then in the book of Revelation, you see the heavenly Jerusalem and the heavenly temple coming down to dwell upon the new heavens and new earth. So you could say like it's but heavily in one sense. You were going to say something?
Two things, it's just how we use these phrases and words without fully realizing what we're saying. But I would say in contrast to Satan's total the world.
Oh yes,
Like,
so
yeah.
And that,
Contrasting it.
yeah, and that's also why I wanted to put these in two different locations, because this could be giving a different connotation than just what you have here. Yeah. So this is also somewhat dependent on what Jesus means by the definition of the word kingdom. It's the Greek word, can be translated in a few different ways, of course, because that always happens, doesn't it? So it can be somewhat more of a kingdom, like we would understand kingdom. You have a king, you have boundaries, you have army, soldier, there's economic and political policies, et cetera, et cetera. But this could also be, I just want to double check my notes. The word can also be translated as reign. My reign, my exercising of power is not of this world. It could also be rulership. And this is
Okay.
pretty close together in terms of in English. So you can kind of bring those to the same idea of this is Jesus exercising his power as Messiah, whereas kingdom here could be realm, kind of the area that it's looking at rather than him reigning. But if we go with more of this definition that Jesus is saying it's more reign or rulership, then that would be more these two, where he's in the world but not of the world, or he's bringing the heavenly down into the earth. Whereas realm would be more the middle here, where you have an eternal kingdom that's lasting forever, starting from within the world and going to the end, and somewhat more of the idea of what the Jews were thinking, that the Messiah would just restore the way Israel has operated for, well, before the Romans. Yeah. So I'll say that this should probably be more the preferred sense, where Jesus is talking not just about a kingdom not of this world, like a future kingdom, like a future kingdom that is coming down, but something that is actually present with him, and that this is continuing on not just in heavenly places, but also in the hearts of all believers who receive the Holy Spirit. So, for the sake of example, Jesus in the Gospel of Luke says, the kingdom of heaven is among you. And it could also be translated in the midst of you, it's in you, but Jesus is basically saying the kingdom of heaven is here among you now, which, given the context of that verse, seems to imply that, yeah, wherever Jesus is, there's the kingdom. So if you have Christ, you have the kingdom of God. Questions?
To me, realm and reign, realm and kingdom seem more like a place.
Yeah.
Whereas reign and rulership seem more like a job, an action.
Yes. Yeah, that's my point. Is that Because when Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world," that kind of makes us think a little bit more towards an actual established area or time period, even of when this is occurring, where this is kind of an ongoing thing. So wherever Jesus Christ is exercising his power, there he is.
So that kind of, that refers to the not of the world.
Yeah.
Phrase.
Yeah. So you could even say that this is referring to the church. Because you do have the church militant, who's us in the world. We're the ones fighting the good fight here on the earth right now. And you still have the church triumphant, those who have gone before us in heaven. Both of us are still going on. We're still connected through Christ to his power, and he's reigning over us. But Jesus Christ has not yet fully manifested his kingdom here in this world, which is why it's still part of the domain of Satan. So Jesus is reigning. He's in the fullness of power now, and we see his pictures of him like this. Say like when he's appearing in his glory before Paul's, because it's just a shining figure before Paul, and Paul can't even process it. Or in the beginning of the book of Revelation, where Jesus is appearing with a face like the sun, and John himself also has some trouble seeing this. So yeah, Jesus reigning now. We're going to see this somewhat start even as Jesus takes up his throne and his crown and his royal garb and his rod of power. This is going to be somewhat more in a mocking fashion by the Romans, but nevertheless, this is where he really officially starts as king, where he wins the right to rule. Of course, being God, he always is in charge of all things, but he manifests this at that time. Any other questions, thoughts? Confusions, queries, wonderments?
Okay. Yes. He's in the world, but not of the world, so the world hated him like he hates us.
Yeah.
If you were of the world will love you.
Yeah. Because that's the specialized use of the word world in John's writings, where John is
Yeah.
to denote
Okay, I was just wondering.
the unbelievers as well as the domain of Satan. This is where you need to be drawn from into the heavenly. So it's not per se a location, but it's a people. The same thing I would say with this is that, yeah, he's looking more towards reigning over specific individuals. Okay. Trying to see if there's any other. That's something. Yeah. I also have in here a note that Jesus could be using a double entendre with the word world, where he's trying to explain to Pilate that it's not of this, not of the people of the who are under the domain of Satan. But he also could be meaning this in a somewhat physical sense, where he's saying, yeah, it's not of this world which will come to an end on the last day. So I'll be reigning to the ends of the new heavens and earth. So it could be a double entendre. I don't know how far to actually press that point. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So we'll move on to Jesus. Okay. So we'll move on to Jesus' next statement. Come on, move on. Where he says, well, if it were counterfactual, so if it were the case that my kingdom is of this specific reality, then my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. So this is known as counterfactual in philosophy, where if somebody is proposing an idea, a counterfactual would be saying, well, if that were actually the case, then you would actually expect to find this evidence. And since we don't have this evidence, then it's most likely not the case that you're trying to argue. Counterfactuals have been pretty big in philosophy for 60 years now. Anyways. So when Jesus says my servants, this is a fun word, because this is the same word that occurs earlier on in the chapter for the officers of the temple who come to arrest Jesus. So it's not just servants, but actual officials, officers, representatives of the office. So Jesus is trying to draw a contrast between the servants of the high priest here, who are actually going out and trying to put down people who are challenging their authority, with his own kingdom, where he does not need to put out his officers to try and prevent his arrest. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Say that again.
Okay. So Jesus is showcasing the difference between the religious powers in Jerusalem at this time, so the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, they have court officials, servants, that they're using to try and defend their power. So they go out to arrest Jesus. And if Jesus were fighting for the same thing that they were fighting for, and Jesus would have bid his apostles to fight on his behalf. However, Jesus basically instructed them to flee. And when Peter tried to go against this, he tried to fight. Jesus told him not to do this. So Jesus has no stake in the worldly power that the current Sanhedrin, who are supposed to be religious, the religious authority, yeah, he has no interest in what they're trying to fight for. They're trying to fight for their place in this world, which is said verbatim at the end of John chapter 11. Jesus is not trying to fight for that thing. But he could also mean not just the apostles. So these were, and the apostles were armed. They had 2 swords. We know they had at least 2 swords. But it could also be referring to the angels, because as when Jesus was being arrested, he said, well, I could send, my father could send down a legion of angels, and then we can to fight to prevent this. So are the angels of this world? No. So obviously Jesus is not trying to fight for the worldly sense of kingdom that people are trying to have here. Yeah. Oh, right. Also, somewhat ironically, since the people who arrested Jesus, the officers of the temple, were officers of the temple, technically they were also supposed to be Jesus Christ's own officials, because Jesus Christ is the incarnate God. He is supposed to be the focus of worship at the temple, but if the guards of the temple are not guarding Jesus, they're going against him, then the officers actually are betraying their true Lord by handing him over to the Jews, and then also later on to the Romans here. So this also has the hint that because the temple officers were sent after Jesus, that the temple itself has fallen into apostasy, has fallen into unbelief and worship of some sort of false idol. I'd say that false idol is worldly power, because that's really what Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin were arguing for at the end of John chapter 11, where they're saying, yeah, it's better for one man to die than for us, basically, well, to die rather than the whole people to suffer. And they're saying, well, the people would suffer if we lose our place at the temple, because the Romans would kick us out. So they're lusting after power, worldly power. And the officers of the temple are helping them protect that worldly power. So there's unbelief going on at the temple. So those officers should have upheld Christ rather than arrest him and then smack him around during the Annas trial. Alrighty. Oh, well, that's actually another good one. So the word there for fight. Yeah. Yeah, it's not the normal word for fighting, as you would say, like with a fist fight or a war. The word is closer to struggling for a prize. Like this would be, let's say, for example, Olympic Games. That type of fighting. So the apostles are not struggling to win Christ a kingdom or secure his rule, but are seeking the prize that he is giving them. So if Jesus is saying, my kingdom is not of this world, my kingdom is more where I reign and what I am giving to you. Well, the apostles don't really need to fight for the kingdom of God, because Jesus had explained to them, like a few hours ago, or several hours ago now, that they already have eternal life in him through faith. So yeah, why would they need to fight in the world for this heavenly gift they already possess?
They probably didn't really understand it at the time.
Well, that too, which is why Peter goes, ah! But yeah, that is more Jesus' point, is why would they need to fight in this world for a worldly possession when they already have the heavenly possession that is, well, eternal? And that's also, I think that's also a pretty good question for us to try and wrestle with ourselves, because if we're looking at our prize, and St. Paul talks about it in this way a couple different places, where he's saying that, yes, to me is not given the fruit of works, so my good works can't get me to salvation, but I receive by grace through faith the death to sin and the resurrection to come. And then Paul says, say in Philippians chapter 3, not that I've already obtained this, but I keep on fighting or struggling to make it my own. So for us in the world, as Christians, what are we really struggling against when we come into opposition in the faith? I'll kind of leave that out there for a second.
Would you repeat that, please?
Sorry, what was that?
The world in our flesh, I guess.
Well, yeah, there's some of that. And because so for anybody who didn't hear, Nancy said that this is kind of the worldly inclination that we have in our flesh if we're struggling against things. Sorry, Laura, what did you say?
I didn't completely hear your question.
Oh, so when we meet opposition in the faith in this world as Christians, knowing that we've already obtained the prize in heaven, not that we've received it completely, because that happens later on. What is the goal for our struggle as we move forward?
Eternal life?
Well, we already have that somewhat, so yes, we want to continue on in it. But let's say somebody comes up to you with a sword and they say, well, unless you, like, I'll fight you as a Christian, and if you don't fight back, you'll just die. So, martyrdom. Is there a point to fighting back at that point in time?
It's human instinct to want to live, to survive.
Yes.
And we probably have other people in our lives that want us around.
And I think that's more the key, is that when we're talking about struggles in the faith, like trying to uphold the struggle, uphold the fight, it's not purely about us. So for that example, if somebody's going to try to martyr you, it's okay, yeah, I'm a Christian. If you want to kill me, and you can kill me, but I'm not going to try and murder you in return. That doesn't make sense. So you could try and fight them to try and get away, but it doesn't make sense for you to go like, okay, well now I need to fight it, need a sword to stab you in the neck or something. That's not really what Christ says, especially when he says turn the other cheek. So the idea is more, well, why would we continue this struggle here? And if all Christians were faced with that issue, like the death in the flesh, would it make sense for us to all die immediately? Well, then there'd be nobody left in the world to continue spreading the name of Christ, to champion the good fight and to bring eternal life through the message of the word to other people. Or for us as Christians, like, yeah, if you're being threatened with this, maybe you're not alone. Maybe you have your family with you, and that person who's killing you for being a Christian would kill them for being Christians. So wouldn't you want to struggle in order to protect your family? Because you also have a duty under the fourth commandment, a reversal of the fourth commandment. So fourth commandment, honor your father and mother. Well, why are you honoring your father and mother? Because they're protecting you and making sure that you're cared for. So you as a parent, you should recognize, yeah, I have an honorable duty to my children to maintain their lives. So in a lot of these scenarios, yeah, we want to make sure the word of God is championed, hopefully help those who are around us as well spiritually as well as physically.
I hope that I'm never in this scenario, but there are instances where Christians are held captive and it's say this, read this, or you'll be killed.
Yeah.
And it obviously goes against Christian belief and doctrine.
Yes.
So what is the right thing to do?
I don't know.
Like it is preservation of your life, and knowing that others know that you're being forced to say that it's not actually what you believe, or should you stand up and say, no, I'm not going to say that?
So my encouragement as a beautiful pastor would be to resist saying that you're apostatizing, or that you're falling away from faith, that you're rejecting Christ. Because, well, even as Christ says, those who reject me before men, I will reject before my Father in heaven. So I'd say that would be a very dangerous precedent to set. But we also know that God knows the heart. So he might know that this is under duress, but it would actually have to be under duress that you're so wrapped up in those thoughts that you're doing this not because you are willingly doing so, but because the sinful flesh is dragging you over there and you can't resist. But if you can resist, I would say resist, even unto the point of death. And I could also draw to several passages that are dealing with that. But yeah, it's a very complicated scenario, and I wouldn't even know myself what I do until I'm under some of those situations, because I do think I could resist some of them, but I don't know if I could resist all.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I guess the overriding thing is like with the public, videos that get put out and stuff, and everybody knows that those aren't the words of the person.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the, well, are you actually?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
um,
Isn't there a passage
So-
in the Bible about God won't tempt you above that you're able?
well, God's not tempting anybody.
No, I know, but I mean, he would provide a means of escape. Does that apply
Yeah,
to
and in
this?
some cases that would actually be death.
Yeah.
Because the proper point in that passage is being able to resist those evils that are presented before you. So part of resisting those evils would be to actually accept death over rejection of Christ and his promise. So this is also why you have in Hebrews chapter 12 commendation of the author of Hebrews for those who he's writing for. But he's also saying, but you have not yet resisted to the point of death. Or more literally shedding blood, but he means like you haven't actually started dying for the faith yet. But that is something that we should be called to do. And it's not something that we're generally aware of here in Canada. Our persecution is somewhat different. But if you were to look to, say, Pakistan or Sri Lanka, like you have Christians dying there all the time. Horrible thing, but since they're dying for their faith, like they're holding on to Christ to their final breath, they can be lauded as martyrs. And historically within Christendom, martyrs have done much to advance the faith because people witness martyrs dying for their faith, recognize, oh, this is something so important that they are rejecting that death should be considered in relation to it. It's even more powerful when some of those martyrs are actually continuing in Christ-like demeanor towards death. For the sake of example, there is a story in, I believe it's from, not Romania. No, Romania, which was behind the Iron Curtain for a while, and the Soviets were persecuting Christians. And one of the pastors who was imprisoned for his faith witnessed how there was somebody who was being tortured for their faith, and he was being tortured by one of the captains there in the facility. Well, the captain at one point said, like, there's no praying, and he was beating up the prisoner, and the prisoner was saying, like, I'm not praying for me, I'm praying for you. And the captain was so put back that he stopped and he left. And he eventually converted to Christianity and himself was captured, put in that prison, and was killed for his faith. But that person who was willing to be martyred, so for that guy to be saved from the horrible atrocities that he was committing, like that's what we're called to do for martyrs, is to love the people who are killing us. And it's again, we hope that we have the strength to do that. It's going to be hard though.
Lutheran pastor got, and I always forget his name.
Dietrich
Dietrich.
Bonhoeffer. No, he was in Germany. This is Richard Wurmbrand, who was in Romania.
Oh,
I
no,
think it's
I
I
know
think it was Romania. No, it's second guessing myself.
I know it's a different story, but I'm just thinking about I hear his name come up in the secular world talking about heroes from time to time. About how he died in a concentration camp trying to
No.
save Jews.
No,
It's what I heard just last week, and I thought,
no, he was not in a
He
concentration camp.
didn't die in a camp.
No, he was arrested and put in prison in I think he was still in Berlin actually.
Oh,
Because
I
I was-
story I heard, I thought they said.
Because I went into the courtyard where they shot him in Berlin.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So he wasn't
Who are
really
you
trying to
talking
say
about?
Big Bonhoeffer.
Jews. That's not exactly why he was arrested. He was definitely trying to help certain Jews. Some of them were also his friends. He was arrested and executed for his part in an execution plot of Hitler.
Are you talking about Bonhoeffer?
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
So for that, I'm thinking like, I don't know if I fully agree with you on this, man. Like, I don't think it's like, yeah, Hitler needs to be stopped, but I don't know if a pastor should be taking that role. In any case, yeah, so he justified it to himself, and that's excuse me, why he was ultimately executed.
Have you seen that? It's like slightly different, but still related. I just saw that at the news a couple of days ago in Quebec. They want to remove the prayer from the street. Like, whoa, that's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then you had commentators saying, well, you gotta. You gotta be careful with all that because they were talking about, oh, they had the problem with there were Muslim people like praying and protesting in front of an Orthodox church.
Well,
So
yeah.
someone was like, well, as long as you're not like actively provocating, it should be allowed, but some are like, oh no, it should be avoided altogether.
Yeah, so the particular issue that brought this up, similar to the hijab question several years ago in Quebec, because with that one, it was a question of identity. Should somebody be wearing a hijab in, let's say, government sector? And there was also questions about identification, even with, say, like bus passes or things like that. So that was a question of identity, but then that went from question of identity of somebody who was masking their face to a ban of all religious symbols, including necklaces and rings and other things. So it went from a somewhat reasonable demand of some people in one religion because they were practicing something to a ban of everything. And then you also have now a question of public prayer because Muslims are very intentionally praying in front of churches and in public spaces, blocking traffic and other stuff. So they are actively trying to cause civic disturbances. So this is protesting to a degree, but trying to hide it under the guise of religion. Whereas even in the Muslim countries from which those people hail, they don't do that. So this is obviously more of a political thing that they're using their religion for. So this question of should we ban that? But whenever I'm hearing it articulated by, like in press statements, like there's greater nuance if you read through all the different statements that people are making, the government figures otherwise. But in more of the public statements, it's, well, we should just ban public prayer. So you have a big blanket statement. And you can't just single out one group. If you ban public prayer, you ban everybody. So Christians are no longer allowed to pray in the street. And that's also somewhat troubling, especially since Christians have been arrested in the past few years of praying silently in their heads, like blocks from abortion clinics. So the people are being arrested for having certain thoughts. And I think that's only happened once. I can't remember, but it's happened several times in the UK. Like even before they brought in the basically thought police laws. I can't remember if it's happened in the United States. I think it might have. But already considering bubble zone laws, they could theoretically do this. Before any Christians
Recently too, there
But-
was this Christian singer.
So I'll finish this thought rather than going on to the rapid press. We only have so much time left, and we still need to finish off the verse. So I'll just concentrate on the end of this thought with so the bubble zone laws were basically saying you can only have certain forms of speech in such a vicinity of whatever it is that we want to protect. At which point you're suspending the freedom of expression of Canadians like a charter right from a specific area, so these are unlawful, but they're widely endorsed. And if we have abandoned public prayer, that is a denial of freedom of expression under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as well as the right to religion in Canada, which is also under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But there's certain loopholes that people can try to invoke in order to allow this to occur. So yes, there's very much an issue within Canada as people are trying to make secularism the actual religion of Canada and the undisputed religion of Canada. There is no other valid one that you can practice in public. So that's our persecution. And I guess the other way to go about doing this is, should we struggle by actually fighting against this, and in what way should we fight against it? Because we should be able to fight against this because it is our charter right to do this in this country. And should we be able to face arrest for it? And certain pastors in our nation have actually challenged this. And some of them are fighting legal battles. There's also, as you were trying to say, Sean Foyt, who's not a Canadian, but should be still protected as somebody who's traveling legally within Canada and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Well, he finally played, but the church has been fined by.
Well,
the city
he's
of
played
Montreal.
multiple concerts. The
Yeah.
issue has been like, that was one of the first ones in Montreal.
Mhm.
And then, so they created a way to try and charge the church, even though legally they can't do that. So they created a complaint. Similar to how the people are trying to create a complaint against Jesus here. I'm not trying to say Sean Ford's Jesus or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but similar to that, where you have trumped up charges there for that church. The people have brought Jesus to Pilate saying, oh yeah, well, even though we're trying to kill him under the blasphemy laws of Israel, what he's actually doing is actually trying to be a king and wrest power away from Caesar, so you have to be the one to kill him. So they're moving away from what they're actually offended by to get somebody to do their will in society. So Sean Foyt has also had multiple concerts being canceled across Canada, and he's been able to do some of them in different venues than what he originally planned. But yeah, it is definitely, yeah, Christianity is under attack in Canada, and people are saying no, it's not. Yeah, they're allowing these things to basically progress to a point where it's going to be a lot faster, where we find it's going to be unavoidable that we have to say, look, we're under persecution.
Or wasn't it because they were afraid of demonstrations and violence outside the concerts?
Well, that's what I brought up in the sermon on Sunday, where the claim was that we need to cancel Christian music, which is preaching peace and love. Like, there's no specifically offensive things in his speeches. So we need to cancel in his songs. I'm sorry. So we need to cancel these concerts to make the protesters happy, rather than actually police the protesters, which is what the government is supposed to be doing in order to protect the free speech and expression of those who are performing these things. They're saying we need to cancel freedom of expression, which is a charter right, in order to avoid these people harming anybody exercising their freedom
And
of
I
speech.
understand that the protest would be his views against.
Because he's against LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Which means you don't have the right, because if you are against LGBTQ, that's hate.
Well,
That's what they say.
well, yeah, not even being against it, but not agreeing with it.
Hmm?
Not even actively speaking against it, but
No, but just,
yeah,
just
disagreeing with it.
yeah.
They already have talked about using the notwithstanding clause, so I don't know how you get to that.
So David's talking about going back to the ban on prayer in Quebec. So yes, but we have very short time remaining, and we still have a bit of a verse left. So
That's awesome.
So I'll end the conversation on that here for now. We might bring this up later on, but like in another Bible study. But we have limited time at the moment. Okay, so Jesus is saying, that my people would fight or strive for a prize. And what I was trying to say is like, well, the prize is eternal life as Jesus Christ outlined to the apostles just hours before during the Last Supper. And they already have it. So if we already have the prize, well, why do we struggle in this world? Well, we struggle in this world to maintain the message of Christ in the world, that we want to have the church being able to continue spreading the good news so others can be saved. And we also want to protect the general well-being of those who are around us, because there are people who depend upon us, and sometimes we actually do need to fight as Christians. There have been Christian armies before.
Like
this
honored
is
Christian soldiers, like we sang on
well,
Sunday.
no, onward Christian soldiers is not about the physical conflict like I just mentioned. It's about the spiritual well-being of people, not just the physical well-being. Okay, yes. So Jesus says that this is my servants would have done this. My arrest by the Jewish leaders. Oh, yes, and that would fight is actually not a finite verb like is being presented here. This is actually the imperfect tense in the Greek. So the better way to translate that would actually be, my servants would be fighting to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leader. So Jesus is saying, like, yeah, they would have always been fighting, and they would still be fighting. They'd be fighting now. They'd be at your doors trying to destroy this crowd, trying to execute me, and they would try to storm the place and bring me out. So they would be fighting if this were the case. But right now, the apostles are all scattered. Yeah. Anyways, so Jesus says, yeah, but now my kingdom is from another place. So the word for in this place, interestingly enough, is also used of the two criminals crucified on the other side of Jesus. So if Jesus is saying my kingdom is not of this place, like we were talking about the different uses of kingdom, and I was saying, well, probably the better way to translate kingdom here is not by kind of a realm, a kingdom. But maybe it's best to understand that more as Jesus Christ's reign or rulership, which is not defined by any physical boundaries. It's defined by who is in him by way of faith. So when Jesus is mentioning place here, he's saying it's from another place. And the word for place kind of triggers our thoughts towards, well, where is he at what time? Well, it could be that this is Jesus saying, but my kingdom is from the cross itself.
My explanation is the kingdom is not, my kingdom is not from the world. It doesn't say place in my Bible.
I have to trust me on this one.
Which verse is it? Oh, you're talking about verse 36?
Yeah, verse 36. So the Greek word is entuthen, which is hence, from here. And the other meaning, which is also why it's used in the Gospel of John for the two thieves, is on both sides. So if you use the word twice, so enothen, then entuthen, that would mean on both sides. So that's used of the two criminals, and that gets brought up again in the Gospel of John. So yeah, I would not translate that as from another world. I like the more ambiguous one because that's probably what John wants us to think about.
Does hence mean here? From here? From here? Hence?
From here, hence can also have a more temporal meaning in the English. In the Greek, though, the Greek is not temporal because that's referring to time. It's locative, referring to location. Which is why it's translated is from another place rather than from hence.
Yeah, not from here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
However, the first statement, my kingdom is not of this world. What would world mean, that the earth, or what would Pilate think he
So
meant
get
by world?
this.
Yeah.
And as I was saying, like the world here is not a location. This is the standard usage of world in the Gospel of John, where the world is referring more towards the place of Satan's domain, which happens to be referring to people, not to a specific location, and definitely not geography. Yeah.
Okay. It's all very interesting.
So the last line is kind of a restating of the first line. Is it saying something different or is it?
Yeah, so it is saying something different because, well, and that's typically how we use language in general is if we're using different words conveys the same thought, we're bringing in different connotations. And especially for the Bible, as everything is crafted very concisely, and John, who likes to repeat a lot of his words and phrases, if there is a different word being used, this is a different meaning being added. So yeah, I am saying that because this word is also brought up with with the criminals crucified on the side of Jesus. It might actually be the case that this is Jesus trying to point to the location of the kingdom being derived from the cross. Yeah. Because if we're looking to, well, how did we become members of Christ's kingdom? He saved us by grace through faith. He has brought us under the cross, the forgiveness of the cross, which opened up at that time the way into heaven. So, yeah. Well, I think that would be a logical interpretation of it. It might not be the absolute exact interpretation that John has on it, but I want to put in that possibility. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? About a slammed Bible? Okay, so I think we'll close in prayer here. So let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, King of our hearts and King of the world, King of the church, we ask you, O Lord, to reign over all things, to bring them under your will, and to defeat all your enemies, the last enemy to be defeated being death. I ask you, O Lord, as we face the challenges of this world, that you continue to reign within our hearts, and we might present ourselves as worthy of the grace that you have bestowed, so that we might meet these things with courage and strength that we need to overcome them. We ask you, O Lord, not to look to worldly things as our guide, but always to have you lighting our path. In your name, O Lord Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.